Morning. Welcome to the Human Resources Committee meeting for MES. We have a relatively short agenda, so hopefully we won't be keeping you very long. The first order of business is to approve the last set of human resources, the minutes from the last Human Resources Committee meeting on November 18, 2021. Does anyone have any comments or questions with regard to those minutes changes? Anyone? If not, we'll have those minutes approved and submit them for the record. The main, the major subjects that we need to cover this morning relate to two items. The first is with regard to the water, wastewater, OIT, the operation technician salary scale, which has been discussed at our various board meetings as a concern. So I will turn that over to Dr. Glass, who can outline MES's proposal to address those concerns. Thank you, Dr. Glass.
Thank you, Chair Wong. So I've mentioned this in the full board meeting several times, and I'm doing my best to be intentional about getting in line with the HR committee, seeing all things related to human resources, including salaries. So the water wastewater group has performed an analysis. I've showed you a table. I've included in the package a table of the salaries that were presented at the wages and salaries that were presented throughout the state. And we are simply raising the hourly pay for our first year OITs to the lowest in the industry in the region. However, this a great starting point to see if this, along with increased recruitment, can add to our bench strength. That, you know, in evaluating our vacancy rate, really looking at a target of 4% vacancy and focusing on management adjustments to attain that vacancy rate. So this group has been as high as 9%, right under 9% vacancy rate, with the Great Resignation and with the challenge. But there has been, this is for me, since it's only a couple of years, but the story is other agencies in the state, other utilities in the state poach our operators, especially talented ones that are passing the courses quickly. So we believe that this will be both a line towards getting more OITs. The review of the last year was 200 engagements with people that had at least come to the website or responded to an Indeed ad, and we were only successful with 14 candidates. Might be up to 15 now. We have a new operator training starting out in Garrett County. So this is very reasonable. The average cost should be less than 1.5% in the total program with this change. And it is in line with ensuring that our operator at the end of this program is not making more than the low end of our operators currently. So we have a full schedule. This is one of the programs, and this is a thing this is a process we're going to go through with all of our career series, where we ensure that folks can focus on their training and their growth and know that this is the path to career development and career growth. And this goes all the way up to the requirements, no college degree required for this series. And it actually goes to the division chief level, but there is only one division chief of operations for water wastewater. But that would be the pinnacle at the bottom of this. At the bottom of this table, to be 2 levels below my position as an operator. So with that, I think I've covered everything, the memo, and I'd be happy to obtain. Oh, one other point I'd like to make briefly is that I feel as though with the graying of the industry and the need for trained operators in the state, that this is a growth opportunity for MES. The more operators that we have that are trained, that are being that are searching for more opportunities, the more opportunities we can respond to, including support for larger municipalities. So it's a great challenge, but with all great challenges, there's great opportunity. So with that, I'd like to answer any questions that the committee has.
Madam Chair, if I could ask something from Dr. Glass for a moment. Just out of my curiosity, looking at this series that you have up here, for example, how long would it be before someone, let's say, got to the level of environmental systems supervisor after they had come in? Let's say they came in at an operator, and then just as an idea, when we get to those higher levels, roughly how long have they usually been within MES?
I can get back to you on some specific examples, but
no, in general.
Well, in general, it's largely dependent on the opportunities that present themselves in the organization. I would assume that there are a few environmental system supervisors in each region. So, you know, we're structured with 4 major regions, I believe, 4 or 5 major regions, but I believe it's 4. I'm getting this mixed up with State Highway Administration. So I believe it should only be a few years to as long as 10 years. It just depends on, you know, it starts to be a pyramid and there's competition. And if someone is extremely bright and taking all the certifications and has taken the supervisor and training program that we now offer again, then that just presents, they're on deck for the next promotion. And then how does that competition go? But at 3 to 5 years, if they were a superstar, I would assume.
Okay. I just wanted to see as that ladder goes, actually, I was going to say ladder goes down, but the ladder is going up when you look.
Yes,
down.
yes.
So I had some idea. I just wanted to have some idea of what it would look like to someone who had come in and will keep, among other things, what they would like to do is to have their salary go up, and some idea of how long it would take them to come in, let's say, out of operator in training 3 and until they've got a chance to go up. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
So I have a question. My first question is: are these in any way tied to the having to have a state operator's license?
Yes, sir. Okay. So the level of operator they've passed, I think it's on the memo. They are, well, maybe it's not. They've become a licensed operator in both water and wastewater treatment. I think it's class 3 and class 5 by the time they're an operator.
Okay, and the next question, I guess, is how different are the facilities? I know you had 5 or 6 circuits, but are there significant differences in the sizes, function of any of the?
Most definitely. So we go from package plants, small package plants, 50,000 gallons per day, to the largest facility is 3 million gallons per day at Cambridge. I think Freedom is also fairly large. I've not visited Freedom yet. So, but I believe Cambridge, the city of Cambridge over on the Eastern Shore, is the largest plant. And I visited, so we have about 6 operators, full-time operators, and a full-time lab tech there. So, but that's the largest facility. So it goes from small package plants where we visit once a day, you know, every other day, the alarms are set, and then the operators are on a circuit. So they have, you know, 3 to 5 plants that they're visiting in the East and the West. So it all just depends on the jurisdiction.
Okay, that's all I have. Those are all the questions I have about the operators.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Witt.
Do you envision having to raise the operator salaries in the future as well?
So we've been, as you all know, we've been having some standard, we've been having some raises already. And, but I have asked their management to look at the series and to see how competitive we are in the series from the operator to the regional supervisor. And let's just compare costs. There's also, sometimes there can be individuals that have maybe been shown more favor in the process. So I want to make sure that we mark those to come back in line, or that those people should be gearing up for promotion. But make sure that we're in line in the series and see how competitive we are. We have the balance between, you know, making sure that we're competitive, but because we span the state, those are various cost of living issues. And this is a challenge for all the statewide agencies, where in the central core, the rates may not be, the wage rate may not be commensurate, but in the East and the West, they're pretty good. So we have that balance to strike. And I've asked the management chain and water and wastewater to evaluate it. We've actually, you know, I did this as a surge team where we were meeting weekly until we could get through the issue of the OIT. And now we are. So some of the folks that were in the OIT meetings are not necessarily senior leadership. So now we made it a smaller group, and we're going to be evaluating the schedule to make sure we're as close to in line as we possibly can. But that's in conjunction with the fact that the agency is just, you all just awarded a 3% raise. So we're evaluating. Short answer is we're evaluating. The long answer is it's just got to be balanced with the impact on our budgets.
Dr. Glass, I have a few questions. You touched on it a little bit, but I just wanted some clarification. It seems to me that if you are increasing the OIT skills and even some of the other proposed pay grades, that people who are currently holding positions will also be in line for adjustment, because otherwise you'll have a compression of salaries. Is that something that you've analyzed?
That's exactly what we're working on with the whole series right now. However, so these are starting low end. And so if someone's been in grade for a while, they've been receiving they've been receiving raises. So if someone is a senior operator, they're most likely not at 48,191. However, we've got to evaluate it. So right now, water wastewater is looking at it, and we're moving forward. We made sure that this is the first time the operator series has been touched in at least 6 years. So those rate increases, go back, half a decade at least. And so that's why that shift doesn't hurt as much. We did make sure that the coming in operator is not making as much as an operator currently. So the gap has been shrunk, and we're going to evaluate it. But anyway, I think I answered your question.
So the impact could be greater than 1.5% in terms of the total budget. But in that regard, will you be able to pass on some of these increased costs to the customers, the clients? So when you charge out their services, you would be able to pass along their salaries?
So water wastewater is dominated by the state reimbursable contract. So the answer is yes. We're fee for service. So anyone on the billable side, their cost is passed on to the customer, which is why, but we're looking at a total customer budget that includes supplies, small equipment, et cetera. So in the context of the state reimbursable, or approximately $30 million per year, this is built in with an overhead rate that's internal to the group and our general and administrative overhead rate. So it's about balancing the large budget and making sure that as we have changes in our both group overhead, we can, in essence, we can do our best to keep the management overhead rate, our internal overhead rate, our G&A overhead rate as under control as possible, to have that budget not expand over what's already been planned, because those budgets are planned out 2 years. So, but these costs are not internal costs. These are costs to clients.
Any other questions? Not. I would like to entertain a motion to have these recommended salary increases for the OIT recommended to the Board of Directors for their consideration and hopeful approval. Can I have a motion, please?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Glass. I'm so glad you were able to participate. And he already signed off. Okay.
No, I'm not. I'm still here, but bye-bye. I'll sign off
Okay.
now.
Oh, there you are. So that your square moved over, but I appreciate it because we certainly needed your input on this. So I appreciate it, and I'll ask you kindly to please excuse yourself now as we go to our next topic. Thank you so much.
Everyone have a great day. Thank you, Ms.
Well,
Thank you.
See you, Charles.
So Dr. Glass, is he still there? Pam, can you just make sure he stands by in case we have a question of him? I'm sure he's not going anywhere in the building.
Yes.
You're on
yes,
mute,
We'll,
yeah.
we'll be sure. Yep.
Thank you so much. And can you bring up the next set of slides, which will be with regard to the draft Executive Director Performance Evaluation Criteria? I apologize to the committee members, but we sent out the last version with edits just last night. So I hope you've received all of that. Just for a little background information, the MES Reform Act requires that the board develop criteria, performance criteria for the executive director. And to that end, Mr. Coleman was very kind to provide us information on two sample formats. The first one came from our consultant, RSM, and they provided a sample executive performance criteria. And the second survey, model survey that was provided was from a nonprofit group called Avocado, which issues a magazine, and in their magazine they did have a very helpful survey form, which we modeled this draft after the Avocado form, but also merged in some of the RSM criteria. So this is how we got here. It's in a tracked version, so you can distinguish what changes we made, and you can compare and see for yourselves how we modified it. Pam, if you can go to the next slide. There are essentially 5 categories that this draft survey form covers. The first category is overall organizational performance. Later on, we'll be covering other criteria that will relate to community leadership, then administration and human resources. After that, financial sustainability and mission impact, and lastly, the board of directors. So looking at the first category of overall organizational performance, we set out here 7 criteria on this page. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. And I'll go through a couple of comments. Some of the tracking changes you see on here are just editorial changes, but I'm just going to go through some of the highlights that we will need to discuss at this point. I did ask Dr. Glass to review it beforehand just for his input to make sure things made sense to him. And he pointed out here, as well as in other places, several clauses that didn't really seem to make a lot of sense. Under subpart E, building respect and profile for the organization in its various constituencies. Dr. Glass, there was another clause there to the effect that he would support the overall field movement in which the organization works. He said he felt that this didn't make sense, and I don't have any problem deleting that particular clause. So unless we have other provisions later on or other criteria later on that talks about his community leadership, and we will be discussing later on some of the marketing aspects, if any, that would be related to his job. So I feel that we can delete that. Does anyone have any concern about that or want to modify that in any way? Hearing none, we'll move on to the other item that we got feedback on from Mr. Coleman was with regard to the state ethics executive order signed by Governor Hogan. And Sean, I'll let you discuss that. I'm not sure where you wanted to place that. I think it may be appropriate perhaps to insert something to that effect under section 1, the overall organizational performance, but I didn't know whether you wanted to address your recommendation.
Yeah, I sent a note to Chairman Wong about one area that I thought the board would want to formally include in a performance evaluation of the executive director is the executive director's requirement to maintain the highest ethical standards. And I provided some language that came out of the governor's executive order on standards of conduct for state employees. I don't think we decided on a specific section on where that would go, but my recommendation is that given the scrutiny of the agency and the executive director in the past, it would be appropriate that that be one of the criteria by which the executive director is evaluated. And it's already an obligation for all state employees to comply with.
If I can restate the specific language that Sean provided us, it would essentially require that the executive director, quote, maintains the highest standard of integrity and places loyalty to the Constitution, the laws, and the ethical principles above private gain. And we may want to just add them at the very top of this section under overall organizational performance. As an
That's where I put it, Marion. Marion, that's where I'd put it. I'd put it right up top.
Yeah, and the language, the language that was quoted comes directly from the executive order.
Yeah.
All right, so we will do that in this section. Does anyone have any other thoughts or input about the subject matter of overall organizational performance?
I'll just point out that another suggestion that I offered is in subsection G, and I'm not sure we're looking at the same document. Yes, that's correct. In G B, there were two items there. One, and you'll see this in another comment, the accounting programs are really by law the responsibility of the treasurer of the agency. So I suggested deleting that section and replacing it with a requirement that the agent, it's the director's obligation to have in place programs and staffing to maintain both environmental compliance and safety compliance. MES is an environmental agency. It's critical that it complies with various environmental programs and statutes and permits. And so we do have an environmental compliance and safety program. So I'm suggesting that there be specific language that is part of the executive director's responsibilities to make sure those programs are adequately maintained and implemented.
Well, it certainly makes sense because he is not the treasurer. He's an overlook of the treasurer of that, but is not the person who actually does it. So I think that let's see here, you put that in on G period B period, correct?
Yes.
To get rid of the original one that started with accounting as the language. Yes, I think you're right about what you have put in there. So unless anyone else has questions or comments, other people might think differently. So
No, I have no comment.
That we later on do address some of the accounting systems in subpart in section F under financial sustainability, so we can, it's not as though it's completely deleted or not addressed. Right. Thank you, Sean. That was a good, thank you for following up on that. Going to the next section, Pam, if you can go to community leadership. There we go. The only change here was Sean had qualified, he deleted obviously the references to nonprofit entities, but then also made sure that with regard to officials, it related to appointed officials, and we deleted funders. So I think that's pretty straightforward.
yeah, no problem that I can see on it. So
Move on to section 3.
Excuse me.
Yes, I'm
Mary,
sorry.
I had a question, and it's more of somewhat of a rhetorical question, but basically, I noticed that there's a lot of social media, and I was wondering if we track that in any way, and if that could be used in this section. Like I said, I don't look into social media every day, but almost every time I go on LinkedIn, I see there is a comment from MES, usually from Dr. Glass, and I'm just wondering if that's a new potential source of showing that we have leadership. And I don't have a specific paragraph or something to put in. I just think it's something that, if not now, something down the road we can think of, because it's clearly something that's going to be used more and more as people who enjoy that get more involved and use it more productively than some of the things it first started out to be.
Would your concern be addressed in section C, which sees that communication vehicles are developed and utilized well? Could social media be considered a communication vehicle?
Yes, I think so. And I think it's also a good source of feedback. Once we track it, if we find it's not a good source of feedback, we can always cut it out. But I think it's I can't say it's up and coming because it's been here for a while.
Do we need to make any change, or do you think your social media concern could be covered under C then? I just want to see if the group
I think
feels
it
we
can be
need
covered
to.
under C. I don't know that it has to be spelled out specifically. That might be something we put down as a footnote to explore.
how about putting in recognized?
Say it again.
Before developed, just said vehicles are recognized, developed, and utilized well. And recognize means that we drive past and people see these things and, realize there is an MES in the world. That's just a thought, Mr. Tanner, to your idea.
Yeah, I just think it's because it's there and because as some of us younger guys transition to more important positions, I don't know what they may be, but at any rate, I just think that there's a real opportunity.
Sure. I just thought that.
Why don't we add that qualifier, right? So it sees that communication vehicles are recognized, developed, and utilized well. And then we'll pass along to Dr. Glass later, the interest or concern about social media.
And recognize means that it's not all banged up and it's not all full of, as it goes down the highway with a whole lot of stuff that doesn't look very clean. I mean, you have to make these things looking decent, and I think he's aware of that. But if you want to enter it in, I think that's fine.
Okay, good point. Thank you, Judge Malkin. Going to administration and human resources, we Mr. Coleman had added some additional language to subpart D to ensure that there's compliance with all provisions of the MES Act as well as relevant workplace and employment laws and policies. I'm okay with that. And going to the very end, I highlighted G and H, and these were criteria that were taken from the RSM recommended survey form. Dr. Glass didn't have any particular problem with those, so I think we're good on that. Does anybody have any particular comments, questions about administration and human resources?
No, look good.
No, I.
Moving right along then to 4, financial sustainability and mission impact. Sean added a new subpart A that the executive director must be knowledgeable regarding budgeting and management of MES's resources. I have no problem with that addition. And I guess a corollary to that would be C.
I don't think I'm the one who added that, but
okay. That may have been from the
I don't have a problem with it either.
Maybe from the RSM survey form. Subpart, it is actually because it's in the purple highlighting. Subpart C, though, I wanted to just discuss with you because I know that we deleted under the first section the accounting, payroll, and cash management system criteria, but I think subpart C maybe covers it in a different way, whereas we would be asking the executive director to ensure that a clear and accurate accounting system is maintained, allowing the board to monitor MES's finances and operations in relationship to the approved budget and to make informed financial decisions. Sean, does that square with your recommendations? And does that not, and can you confirm that it doesn't conflict with the treasurer's duties?
Well, I think it would. Well, the obligation for both B and C is really the treasurer's under the act. But my suggestion would be maybe adding the phrase cooperates with the treasurer to assure at the start of each of those sections. And that would then obligate the executive director to work with the treasurer to see that these things are done.
So in addition to C here, you're saying to add the same qualifier to the part we deleted in subpart in the first section?
No, if you could look just above C, look at B.
Oh, B. Okay, I'm sorry. Here.
I would add it right
Oh,
there.
okay. Got it. Thank you. And then I think the other comment that Sean has made, obviously in subpart, I just want to make sure okay. In subpart E, we made a reference to the finance committee. We'll be changing that to treasurer or deputy treasurer, as Sean had suggested. I had a question in G. This was, I believe, taken from the RSM survey, but it states it would require that the executive director develop realistic, ambitious plans for acquiring funds. Dr. Glass had a concern about that based on the role and functions of MES. And so I had two revisions here. The first was, I wasn't sure how ambitious would be defined. So I was going to recommend deleting the term ambitious and then just simply saying that he would have to, or the executive director would have to develop realistic plans for marketing the services of MES. Again, understanding that the original survey format was for nonprofit organizations that would have a fundraising goal to it. So that's not so much the case here at MES. So rather than focusing on acquiring funds, just indicate that he would have plans for marketing services of MES. Or should we just delete it?
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
This was the area that I wanted to make a comment or two, if I may. Most of the businesses that I've overseen usually have a strategic plan and they have an annual operating plan. And the executive director or chief executive officer is responsible for executing the annual operating plan and also to bite off a piece of whatever the strategic plan calls for and is evaluated thereon. I don't think we want our executive director to dream up marketing plans and whatnot. I think that that's something, a governance decision, and we need to get some guidance there. I think this document is fine as far as it goes, but in order for him to effectively lead this organization and be evaluated on his performance, it's incumbent on the board to lay out that which we expect him to accomplish. Now, we've only been in this for 7 or 8 months so far, and our major assignment the legislature asks us to do under the Reform Act, and I think we would give the executive director high grades for that. And we're also supposed to operate on a fiscally sound basis, and we've done that. But going forward, I think that a strategic plan drawn up by the administration and the board and an annual operating plan would be a roadmap to measure the executive director's performance. All of these criteria are great, but we don't have anything, we don't have a yardstick to measure it by. And then the last comment I would make is that an organization this size with this scope, once every 3 or 4 years, we ought to do a 360-degree review. And I think that should be programmed into our evaluation policy. I think something in the 2025 timeframe would be appropriate, so that we will have a chance to see how he's done over 3 years. And that way, the 360 review consults the rank and file, it consults customers, it consults board members, and it consults senior staff, and you really get a three-dimensional picture of the performance of our chief executive. So those would be my comments. We don't have to do this today. In fact, I think if we do a little retreat or something that where we start to do some strategic planning and adopt an annual operating plan, I think it can be incorporated in due course. But that's what captured my attention.
Exactly what you just said. I was thinking at the time you were saying it, and I agree with you, Mr. Secretary, that this does not fit precisely in the what we're looking at now with the little dots and numbers, but something to be looked upon over a period of time, give them a chance to get everything working to the way we want and the way it should be. And I agree with you that along the line that probably should happen. How it happens and when, I think, will depend on a couple of things that we have to think about as time goes by. But I wouldn't put it right into this.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the other thing is we have to realize where we are in the time sequence. The General Assembly wants the board to be very active in overseeing and evaluating the chief executive based upon past events. And that's part of the territory, and I think that's being covered well by this document. But going forward, I think we got to do a little more.
Does the committee want to consider adding a provision then that the executive director would assist the board in developing a strategic and operating plan?
Sounds reasonable.
And
that's certainly a way to get it started.
Yeah, and implementing it as appropriate.
Yeah.
So should we add something to that effect there?
I would suggest that. And
Okay.
I'm sure Secretary Neal would as well. And I don't know about our other friends there.
I can co-sign that.
I would agree.
Okay, great. Excellent input. I think the rest, oh, yeah, that little I there, we're deleting that. Again, minor edits here. Anything else on this page that people have any comments about?
So it's I, J, and K that would go?
I and J would go.
Yeah, they're similar, but
it's a little hard to see. Oh, and you're right. K would also go. I didn't see the end of that.
K and L.
Yeah.
I mean J and K. Both.
Yes. We're almost there, everyone. Any other comments under that section?
No.
All right. Going to the last item for Board of Directors. Again, this was something I think that came from RSM understands. We added the requirement that the director understands the differences between the respective roles of ED and the board. And the only major deletion is at the very end, subpart F, where the director would work with the board officers to ensure that the board is effective as a body, and then we're deleting the rest of the the criteria there because it's really just not applicable. It stated that that the director also would ensure that recruitment, involvement, and departures of individual board members are effective. Dr. Glass pointed out that we are appointed by the governor and therefore that would not be applicable. So I don't have any problem with that.
I think that's correct. I think it should be deleted.
And I think that is all that we have for now. Is there anything else that, actually there was a last page with regard to senior staff. Sean, the MES Reform Act only requires us to develop criteria though for the executive director. Is that correct? Or do we have to address the other senior staff?
The Reform Act only requires the board to address the performance of the executive director.
I think we ought to leave it that way.
So this next page is just going to be deleted.
Well, I think
great.
This particular page was not an evaluation of the subordinate staff, but it was, it's more of a survey asking senior staff to anonymously comment on performance by the executive director.
Okay, thank you. Is that something that we want to do? That's right.
Madam Chair, that's something you might encounter a 360 review. I'm not so sure. I mean, you can ask for confidential comments in conjunction with an annual review, but it's typically done when you're doing the comprehensive 360-degree review where you're asking everybody. I think, again, because of the sensitivity of past events, the legislature might be concerned that that people's opinions might be stifled, and the board should ask. I'm ambivalent. I think we've got a good executive director. We've got a good process going, and I'm not so sure this is
Let's delete it for now, because certainly it won't preclude us from later on, if we want to get feedback, we can do so. And as Secretary Neal mentioned, we can do it as part of a comprehensive review later on.
Yeah, let me point out that the statute does not require this process to be in place by any particular time, although I think the idea is that it be done sooner rather than later, at least than going forward on a fiscal year basis. But the statute also allows the board to change both the criteria and the process at any time. It would have to be done at a meeting of the board formally, but the board can change any of this when it so chooses.
Right.
For purposes of presenting this to the board on Thursday, I'm also going to just provide the criteria. The first page, Pam, if you can go back to the first page, outlined a process which I didn't really take a close look at, so I'm not even sure how. I mean, this would have to be probably modified. So I'm just going to take the process language out of here for now. And for purposes of the board, unless Mr. Coleman, you think otherwise, should we include a process?
Yeah, the statute says that the board has to establish their criteria and procedures for evaluating the director. And
all right,
you may want to think about timeframes for when this would all take place. For example, in the state system, they basically have 2 periods each year when individuals, all state employees are evaluated. It depends on when they start their service. So typically, other state employees are evaluated either in December or in June, so that if there are changes, then they would take place either on January 1st or July 1st.
Right.
I'm sorry, Ms. Wong, I'm not able to hear you.
I asked if anyone had any comments or thoughts about doing a two-step evaluation or doing it in 6-month increments.
I was pointing out that while they do mid-year and end-of-year performance evaluations in the state, the end of year takes place either in June or December, depending on when the individuals started their employment.
What I think the first decision you have to make is whether you want to do it on a calendar year basis or a fiscal year basis. I like evaluations to tie in with the beginning and end of your operating fiscal year so that you can adequately measure financial results as one of the criteria, your financial performance. So that would be one sense of timing that you'd have.
I will also point out, in terms of how the agency has its current BEST program structured, the way that is supposed to work is that there's a review of the financial performance of the agency when the audit comes in. It's supposed to happen in September, although because of COVID, it's been delayed a couple of months the last few years. And then the board determines whether or not the goals have been met and if employees are going to be eligible for a BEST payment. The current executive incentive program is also tied to that same calendar basis. So you may want to set the evaluation period or at least the performance evaluation to occur sometime in July. That will kind of peg along with the you'll have end of year financial statements. They won't be audited financial statements, but you'll have end of year statements at that point.
I just think it makes sense to coincide with the beginning and end of your operating year, because that makes things pretty clean.
I will agree.
So just do it once a year?
Yes.
Yes.
I would.
Okay, I agree. So in terms of actual timing, should we have the all right. Should we have it a month after the end of the fiscal year? So it'll be the beginning of the new fiscal year. So we'll do it in that that month. So be in May. I'm sorry, June.
The fiscal year ends on June the 30th.
30th, right.
And do it in July. Okay.
I'm not so sure you have to be specific as to a date. I would say following the close of the fiscal year. For anyway, you may want the audited financial statements to be available when you make these evaluations, which means it could go into September or October. So I would just say after the close of the fiscal year.
All right, sounds good. In terms of procedures, at the very end, there's a tip about involving human resources to make sure the review takes place. I mean, all it appears to be is sort of a reminder.
Is it tied to the process that's above it? In other words, you.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm inclined to do is maybe just add a footnote. Is that something to the effect that you know, that human resources shall notify. I don't know how. I mean, we're going to be aware of it. I don't know if we have to be involved. If we have to get reminders from HR, but we can certainly add a note that HR will retain the evaluations in the executive personnel file and related salary documentation, something to that effect. Or I don't even think we need that. Yeah, I mean, because I'm going to delete that on the bottom. We don't need to, just because process G indicates that the review and the responses are going to be placed in the executive personnel file.
Yeah.
So
And,
I think.
I was just going to say, Madam Chair, that I can personally attest that Pam Fuller, the clerk of the board, is very good at sending out reminders to one thing to do.
Other duties as assigned.
Just make some minor edits here where it says ED for executives. I'll just spell out executive director. Consistent, we'll capitalize the word. Any other thoughts, comments with regard to the evaluation criteria?
Well, thank you very much for putting all your time into it, and everybody else who had anything to do with it, Sean and whoever else. Thank you very much. I think it's a good piece of work.
I would like a motion from the committee members to approve the suggested changes to the draft evaluation survey form in order for us to forward our recommendations to the board.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. And with that, I think we finished our business for today. I hope I haven't kept you too long. Okay, just short of an hour. I was hoping we'd be shorter. Thank you so much, everyone. And I guess we'll all see each other on Thursday.
It's not, well, it's not this Thursday. It's the week
Thursday a
after.
week.
Yeah,
Next
Thursday.
Thursday.
Oh, for some reason I was thinking it was this Thursday, so it's next week. Okay, so we have plenty of time.
Yeah.
We
All
do
right,
have
good.
time. Indeed.
So if you would want, Pam and I can work on revising the document and getting it sent out to you, Ms. Wong, and the other committee members, if you'd like, before it gets sent to the full board, to make sure we've properly captured the changes that you've requested.
We have
That'd be
time
great.
for that. Good.
There was some earlier language that I was talking about revising. Do you want me to send that over to you, or did you or Pam get the gist of that? Let me see, where was it? About the about the executive director working with the board to ensure that a strategic plan and operating plan are developed. Do you want me to just give you that language, or do you have that?
Yes, if you could provide that, please.
Okay. That was probably the only major addition. Great. All right. Well, that's a big help. Thank you so much, everyone.
Well,
And
Thank you.
stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Okay. Goodbye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.